to have everybody joining us this evening. We'll give it maybe just 30 more seconds to let the last stragglers get on, and then we can kick off. But yeah, big thanks to everybody that's joined already. It's really amazing to see all of your faces. I know we're all doing a lot of Zooming these days, but this is really nice to see you all. On that note, I may actually just get us going. Am I good to go, Naveed? Thumbs up. Okay, away we go. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Let's kick off. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Results UK Grassroots Conference call for March. I hope that you're all staying safe and well. For those of you who don't know me, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Aaron Oxley and I'm the Executive Director of Results UK. Welcome to you all. As regular attendees on these calls will already know, we do record these calls and we post the recording on our website. We do that so that people who can't make the call this evening can catch up later, see what we've been talking about and learn about the actions we'll be taking. While we always enjoy seeing everyone's smiling faces, it's really not a problem at all if you'd rather turn your video off too, given that we're recording. That's totally okay. Just wanted to let you know. If we do have anyone new on this call, a very special welcome to you. We'd love it if you would feel free to introduce yourself. If you want to go off mute and say hi, that's great. Alternatively, you can introduce yourself in the chat function, maybe say where you are in the country. It's of course not compulsory. You're allowed to lurk, that's also okay. Is there anybody new tonight that wants to say hello though?
Hi, yeah, I'm Clervy. I'm from Luxembourg and France, but I currently study in Brighton, where I'm with the group, yeah.
Clearly, lovely to have you.
Thank you.
Good news from France I'll be talking about later today. So a great call to be having as your first one. Anybody else want to say hi?
I'm Michael. I'm from Edinburgh, and that's also where I'm residing right now. So hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Michael. Great to have you. Love Edinburgh. Been there plenty of times. It's a magnificent city. Great to have you with us. Anybody else? No? Okay. I can't actually see the chat just now, but if you'd rather just say hi there, then that's totally okay. And actually, that brings me to one final housekeeping thing before we kick off in earnest. Please do keep yourself muted during the call. If you've got a question or comment as we go, do please feel free to use the chat box, as we've got people keeping an eye on that, and so that's exactly what it's there for. I'm going to introduce our guest speaker in a few minutes, and after some pre-arranged questions that we've got organised to get them rolling, we're going to open the floor for questions for them in the normal way, so there'll be a chance to pop off mute then too. So let's go. To start off with, I want to update you about the threat to UK aid. It's something we've been very concerned about for quite a long time now, and been the subject of numerous calls over the last few months. As most of you already know, the government's plans to reduce the UK's international aid spending from 0.7 to 0.5% of our gross national income, to cut. That coming on top of cuts already announced last year would see the aid budget reduced by a total of around £5 billion per year. That's around about a third of the amount of money that we currently spend on aid. It's a big deal. We've seen campaigners come out in force on this important issue, and you results advocates have absolutely been in the forefront of this. We're going to hear about all of that in a couple of minutes when Ruthie gives her roundup of activities from around the UK. We've seen a really big surge of activity this month, and I just really want to say an absolutely massive thank you to all of you who've taken action so far at this time of serious risk for international aid and development, right when we need it the most. And if you've not yet been able to take action, or if there's more that you might be able to do, such as asking friends and family to write a letter to their MP, then please do have a look at our action materials from last month, which explains why this is important in a bit more depth. We're going to put a link to that in the chat box. So let's remind ourselves why this matters. So UK aid has been spent incredibly effectively on poverty reduction for many years. Just one example, it's helped millions of children receive an education, as we'll be hearing about later on this evening. It's also helped provide essential vaccinations to millions of children, paid for diagnosis and treatment for diseases such as tuberculosis, AIDS, and malaria, and saved millions of lives. And it's played a major part in the global fight against malnutrition, again, saving millions of lives and helping children reach their full potential. And we get all of this for less than 1 penny in every pound of wealth that we create every year. Cutting the aid budget will, and that's not might, but will have an impact in that more children will die unnecessarily from preventable diseases. Fewer children, especially girls and other particularly vulnerable children, such as those in emergency situations and those with disabilities, they won't get to go to school. And more people will suffer the lifelong consequences of poor nutrition. All of this directly contradicts the long-held government policy, which we've all seen stated not only in the news, but in letter after letter received in response to your campaigning over the years of the UK's commitment to girls' education, to fighting malnutrition, and to protecting people caught in some of the worst humanitarian situations, such as in Yemen or Syria. The government's rationale for the cuts has been that the current economic situation means we can't afford it, but we know that simply is not true. The COVID-19 pandemic makes it more vital than ever that we stand in solidarity with countries around the world and not damage their health and education systems at a time when those are needed the most. This is a political decision, which will make very little difference to our domestic economy and which is wrong in principle. And it's particularly bad timing given that other rich nations are actually increasing their international aid. A particularly relevant example is France. And you'll see me start to smile because this is great news. In France, they voted today in their National Assembly to increase their aid budget to 0.7% by the year 2025. That's up from the level where it is now, which is 0.55%. This was passed unanimously in their parliament, 502 yeses, 0 opposed, a fantastic victory. And importantly, this is one more G7 country joining the UK in having their commitment to 0.7% enshrined in law. And that will happen once this legislation comes into force in June in France. We have to offer our huge congratulations to France for this forward-sighted and humane decision, which is going to go a long way to reducing poverty and fighting diseases around the world, and is absolutely the right thing to be doing at this moment in time. As we heard on last month's conference call, we still don't know exactly how the cuts in the UK's aid budget are going to be made. And in fact, a Freedom of Information request for this exact information was made by BOND, that's like the International Development Apex body, that was turned down earlier this month. So there's inevitably a lot of speculation. And one of the most informed people about how the cuts could fall is development economist Ian Mitchell. He was our guest speaker last month. If you missed that call, you can find a recording of his fascinating analysis on our website. And again, we're going to link to that in the chat box. Alongside the recording of the call, you'll also see a link to an article he co-authored with lots of detail about how the estimates of potential cuts were calculated. He briefed us on those. And so the detail there is really, really fascinating. It shows exactly the scale and of the cuts and how those are affordable for our country or not. So last month, we told you that our best guess was that the legislation to reduce the aid budget wouldn't be announced until April. But according to an article in the Daily Mail that came out a few weeks back, which hasn't been contradicted, the government has delayed its expected announcement of legislation to reduce our aid budget until after the G7 meeting in June, apparently, we think, to avoid an embarrassing defeat in Parliament. What this quite likely tells us is that the government is taking the rebellion in the Conservative Party on this issue very seriously. And this shows that the campaign that you've all been a part of is having a real impact. As far as we know, the legislation is still planned to go ahead, as it must do if the cuts are to be made legal, although there are no public signs of preparations being made for that by the government. Again, for people who are new to this issue, the reason legislation is needed to enact the cuts and why the government can't just do it is because the UK's commitment to spending 0.7% of our national income on aid is actually enshrined in law in the International Development Official Development Assistance Target Act of 2015. So the question is, what does this delay mean for our strategy to oppose the cuts? What it ultimately boils down to is that we still need our MPs to know that there is public support for UK aid to be maintained at current levels whenever the vote is eventually announced. One bit of speculation that's been going around this week, and I apologise that it gets a bit technical, but we thought we should mention it, is that aid cuts might be sneaked into the finance bill that follows tomorrow's budget. Intelligence we've received through the Aid Coalition says this isn't likely, as this would be constitutionally unprecedented, I'm told. But if it did happen, it would be a bad thing. This is because although the MPs would get to vote, it would only be on the budget as a whole, and they wouldn't get the chance to vote on the issue of UK aid specifically. And it's unlikely that many amendments would be made to the whole budget around that. The truth is, we simply won't know until after the budget. But given today's unanimous vote in France for their own legally binding commitment to 0.7, it would be politically explosive. So whatever happens tomorrow at results, we need to continue to argue for the things that matter. And one of the most pressing ones of these right now is education. On tonight's call, we're going to hear an expert speaker tell us why. But before I introduce her, I hand over to Ruthie for the usual roundup of all your activities around the UK in the last month that have helped us get us to exactly where we are right now, which is in a pretty decent place. Over to you, Ruthie.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everyone. There's quite a lot of things to highlight in this roundup, so yeah, I'm going to get started straight away. Over the last few weeks, the Aid Coalition has been running various training sessions about UK aid, and these reached hundreds of campaigners across the country who are passionate about fighting to save the commitment of spending 0.7 GNI on UK aid. And there was also really good attendance by results campaigners. So I hope those of you who were able to go found them useful. And as you heard from Aaron, the fight to save UK aid spending at 0.7 carries on. And action from you all is part of this wider campaign and something bigger. So keep up the amazing work. Take action if you haven't already, and if you can. And please keep emailing us with your updates, because we love hearing them and reading the amazing letters that are being sent out. From the emails we've received so far about action that's been taken, it looks like results campaigners have, between you, contacted over 30 MPs, with some MPs receiving multiple letters. One in Birmingham, Gary Sambrook, has received 10 letters supporting UK aid and urging him to vote against any cuts. And not only is this number counting, but also contact and pressure is going beyond sending letters. And I'm going to hand over to Hannah, who I think is on the call and from the Edinburgh group, who recently met with her MP to briefly tell us about how the meeting came about and how it went.
Hi, I'm Hannah from the Edinburgh group. And a few weeks ago, myself and Jamil from the Edinburgh group and Della as well had a meeting with our MP, Deirdre Brock. She's an SNP MP, but it went really well. She seemed really interested in what we had to say, and she asked for lots of follow-up information as well. And she said when she gets a chance to vote, she'll definitely vote against the aid cuts. And she was also happy to write to Dominic Raab as well, so hopefully she will do that. But on top of that, she's also part of the Crack the Crisis Coalition, and she even offered to ask some questions to the Foreign Commonwealth Office on our behalf as well, which is obviously amazing. So yeah.
Thank you, Hannah, and that's a great update. Amazing work there. And just a reminder that in the February action materials, there's tips and guidance for contact with your MP and potential next steps. So if you were thinking about looking at arranging a meeting, we have a campaign guide available on the website. And yeah. So now for a few other snippets of updates and action. I'm going to quickly share my screen because Emily in Edinburgh has made some amazing Instagram posts. Okay, I think I've just shared. Can you see the Instagram posts on my screen? You can see my notes. Okay, this is a wonderful example of how Zoom screen sharing cannot go according to plan. Can you see my results? Instagram post? No. Now.
Yes.
Great. Well, it's worth the wait because I think they're really engaging, and yeah, a lot of work's gone into condensing a very complex topic into some very eye-catching graphics. So yeah, if you are on Instagram. I'm sure the Results Edinburgh group would love some sharing, and I'll be sharing them on the Results Twitter as well coming up. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that social media savvy work. And the London group have written a really inspiring and interesting blog where volunteers share their personal reasons for campaigning against the aid cuts and also for being involved with Results. So we can share that in the chat, and I recommend everyone giving it a read, and well done to everyone who made that blog happen as well. Now for a quick update from the Macclesfield group, who have been campaigning with Results for decades. And since the move to online campaigning and meeting has allowed for people beyond Macclesfield to get involved, they've made the exciting decision to rebrand and expand, renaming themselves Results Cheshire, with the hope of having a wider reach. And they've also made a Facebook page, so we'll share that. And again, if you're on social media, I'm sure having a look at that and giving them a like would be appreciated. And I'm now going to take a few minutes to go over some of the survey results from the Have Your Say survey, which went out a few weeks ago. And thanks to everyone who filled that in. And just to say that we're always open to feedback and suggestions, so don't feel that that was your only chance to let us know what you think or to share ideas. As I said, it's going to be a very brief sharing of some of the findings and a few of the ideas that we've looked at so far, but rest assured that we are taking this seriously and incorporating your feedback into our plans and the work we're doing. So attempt number 2 at a screen share. Okay. I know you can't see it yet, but it's getting there. Oh, sorry about this. Okay, hopefully you can now all see a bit of a presentation with some of the survey results. So yeah, we sent out a survey a few weeks ago that kind of asked for feedback, and if you're newer, we've got a separate one that we send to people who are new to kind of hear about how the process of getting involved was. So yeah, I'll be sending that out to everyone who's new joining today. And I thought it'd be interesting to highlight that there was a real mix of answers. So there weren't really any trends on if people have been involved for a long time or not, based on the other answers that they gave. And also there's a real mix of kind of people who answered who have been involved for a long time, and also how many hours they spend at Results, campaigning on Results issues in a month. It was great to hear some positive feedback about these calls, and yeah, on the whole, some really nice comments there. So it's good to hear that you find them interesting and inspiring to take action. So when we asked about what kind of campaign actions are the most exciting, again, it was very varied, and some really good suggestions came out about maybe how we could incorporate other ideas and other actions and asks. And actually, one of those was about social media that came up a few times. So you'll see in March's action, we have included some social media suggestions. But as I said, there's more work to be doing. Campaign information. Again, it was great to hear some positive feedback about the action materials we sent out. And there were some good suggestions coming out of that question as well. We noticed, or a few people hadn't ever seen our campaign guides or blogs online. They're on the website, so feel free to have a look, but also if you have any ideas about how we can make these more visible, please just drop us an email. It might be that, yeah, we're not sharing them in the way that we could. In terms of impact, we're going to look at how we could improve our feedback loop, as it's important you know how much impact you make. And MP relationships, there was a real mix. So I thought this would be a reassuring one to share, because some people had never spoken to their MP, others had an established positive relationship. But I got a sense of kind of positive intentions, which was really great. And in terms of training, again, some really good ideas came out of that, and we're planning and thinking about training for the year ahead. So not much to report on our end yet, but yeah, that was a useful one. And other comments and feedback that came through were kind of suggestions about skill sharing and forums for campaigners to link up, and filtering of new inquiries and giving more information. So again, we're looking at those, but just to pick up on a few other ideas that we've had and we'll be looking at and working on is a welcome pack for new inquiries and people interested in getting involved, and also an anti-oppression project plan, which will include, well, in the short term, we're doing a group safety document, but longer term, it's a bigger project that a lot of work will come out of. So in a nutshell, that is a few of the findings. So again, thank you, and please feel free to send us any other ideas that you have. So I'm going to just go back to the March action and highlight that it is about education and the Global Partnership for Education Replenishment, as we know, and that's what we're going to be hearing about today. But in the action materials, if you haven't seen them already, we've got an action sheet with the context of the campaign, and also an e-action template letter to the Foreign Secretary, which you can sign, or you could also send to friends and family to sign. And we've included on the background sheet some tips and ideas for taking action, some talking points on how this relates to the February action and the wider campaign about UK aid, and also some social media content and suggestions and a case study. And just to highlight that International Women's Day is March the 8th, next Monday. So some of the social media ideas we've shared are relevant then, but more broadly, it might be a nice day, a hook to share the template letter and get people involved with the campaign. Lastly, we're shortly going to send out an email with the recording of this call, and also details about an exciting event coming up, so keep a lookout for that. Since 2009, Results has worked with multiple partners in Ghana, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, and Waki Health, a Pan-Africa advocacy organisation, on a programme called the Youth Leaders for Health. And the programme's been supporting young people in their countries to develop advocacy campaigns which focus on malaria, and using that as an entry point to talk about health system strengthening. And the Youth Leader for Health programme has achieved loads, and I'm going to share in the chat a recent video they made for Valentine's Day. It's just really great, and they're very active on Twitter, so if you want to take a look at some of their work, I'd recommend having a look. But the programme's coming to an end, and we'll be organising a celebration event to give the Youth Leaders for Health and Results campaigners in the UK a chance to connect and have a two-way conversation, to share your experiences of advocacy in our very different contexts and hear about theirs, and share kind of ideas and experiences. And more details of this will follow in that email. But if you are interested, you can save the date, which is Wednesday, the 17th of March at 5 p.m. That's all for now. Thank you, everyone, and back to Aaron.
Thanks so much, Ruthie. We're going to jump straight into the topic of tonight's call. We're talking about global education. Now, quality education is an essential building block for children to lead healthy and prosperous lives. Yet despite education being a human right and being recognised in UN Global Goal 4, SDG 4, millions of children are still being denied schooling. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has absolutely exacerbated this, as many people in the UK will have experienced firsthand. As we now hear, 2021 is an important year for the Global Partnership for Education, the GPE. It's one of the largest multilateral education funds, and the UK is co-hosting the GP replenishment at the Global Education Summit this coming summer. So to tell us all about this and the opportunity for advocates like us to make a difference, it's my great pleasure to introduce Anna Darling, who's the Policy and Advocacy Advisor for Education at Plan International UK, and is also the co-chair of the Policy and Parliamentary Group for the Send My Friend to School campaign, which is in turn the UK arm of the Global Campaign for Education, of which Results is a member. Anna, great to have you.
Thanks very much, Aaron. It's great to be here, and thanks everyone. Great to meet you all. It's a bit daunting to see 54 participants on the call, but we don't often get to see campaigners in the sector, so great to see you all.
And thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for giving up part of your evening to do so. As you've seen, we've got volunteers from all over the UK, from Scotland to the South Coast. Some of the folks on the call have decades of experience on advocacy and international development issues. Others, if you've been on from the start, you've seen a brand new today. But I think everybody on the call this evening is really keen to do their bit to help maintain effective UK aid spending. And particularly, we're looking forward to hearing what you think we can do to support funding for global education. So we're going to start by asking you a few opening questions, which we've shared with you in advance. After that, we're going to open the discussion for anybody who wants to ask a question. Before we kick into that, though, Anna, could you just take a second to introduce yourself to people on the call? Maybe share a little bit of an outline of what your role is at Plan International. But my favourite question, how did you get into advocacy on global education? What makes you so excited to be doing the work?
Thanks, Aaron. So yeah, as Aaron said, I'm Anna Darling. I'm the Education Policy and Advocacy Advisor at Plan International UK, which is a global children's charity that fights for children's rights and gender equality, especially equality for girls. And we work very closely with results, as Aaron said, on the Send My Friend to School campaign, which is the coalition of UK charities working on global education. And I co-chair the policy working group of that campaign. So we work on lots of different issues influencing the UK government. At Plan, my role is to influence the UK government on its girls' education agenda. I'll come into this when I give a bit more background on GPE, but girls' education is a big priority for the UK government at the moment, so it takes up a lot of our time at Plan and with Send My Friend. How did I get into it? So I've worked in children's rights charities in policy and advocacy for almost a decade now, having studied politics and international development and then children's rights at university. I've been working in global education for a couple of years now. What gets me so excited, we get to work directly with girls and youth activists at Plan. And there's, I mean, I'll come to this, but there's lots of benefits, obviously, to quality education, as Aaron has said, but the main thing for me is empowering young people, girls and boys, to make choices about their lives. And we see that from the impact of education programs and also of our advocacy and our influence with the UK government. And I love standing up with girls and young people to advocate for themselves and for their own education. So that gets me up every day, albeit in the house at the moment.
Thanks, Anna. I always love that, but to hear people's own personal motivations, because I think that really is why all of us are on this call. Is there's something that in our lives that has made us think that this is a really important way to spend our time. So let's go straight to our pre-arranged questions before we open up the floor. When we get to those, grab your pen. If you prefer to text in a question rather than write it in the chat box or yell it out, the number to text questions in tonight is 0777 56 111 78. That's 0777 56 111 78. But we'll go straight to the first question for the evening, which I think is coming from Manchester.
Hi, thank you, Aaron. Anna, the question from Manchester is, why is Global Goal 4 on access to quality education important, and how close are we to achieving it?
Great, thanks, Rachel. I mean, it's quite simple, really. I think education is life-saving and it's fundamental to ending poverty and improving lives of young people and adults. It is connected to virtually every other sustainable development goal, whether it's health, participation, gender equality, combating climate change, reducing conflict, boosting economies. Education can play a role in all of those different aspects and therefore deliver all of the different SDG goals. Despite progress, and there has been progress, Aaron mentioned at the start, at the moment, we have hit a stall over the last few years, and we are in the greatest education emergency of our lifetime. I know we're all fed up of hearing the word unprecedented, but this really is unprecedented. Even before COVID-19 hit, there were hundreds of millions of children out of school because of poverty, conflict, the climate crisis, violence, social norms, and discrimination. They were all of those factors were excluding children from school. And school closures because of COVID-19 have only exacerbated this crisis. At the height of the lockdown last year, there were 1.6 billion learners out of school. And millions across the world reported learning nothing while out of school, and girls and children with disabilities and also refugee and displaced children reported the worst rates of distance learning, with many saying that they weren't learning at all. And we know from the young people, I know many of the people in this call, the young people and children that we know here are struggling with the digital divide and not having access. That is, you know, exacerbated massively across the world, particularly in areas of conflict and displacement. And the longer that children are out of school, the less likely they are to return. And that is especially a problem for children with disabilities, the most marginalised, and also girls who, because of the economic strains from COVID-19, are likely to enter into child marriage to shoulder the economic burden for families. They might not have access to sexual and reproductive health services, so they might get pregnant. And we know that girls who get pregnant or who marry early cannot go back to school, often because of discriminatory policies and also discrimination in the community. So it is of absolute vital importance that we get as many children back into school in the first place as possible. How close are we to delivering SDG 4? I mean, that's the context. A significant driver of the poor progress in reducing the number of out of school children and also in the poor learning outcomes is the downward trend to aid to education. And Aaron mentioned this at the start. There are countries, the rich countries, stepping up, but it's not enough. Globally, aid to education at the moment has been stagnant since 2010, so it hasn't increased at all. And it's often poorly targeted and fails to reach the most in need countries, and in those countries, the most marginalized children. There's currently a 148 billion financing gap to education globally. And it's estimated by UNESCO, the latest statistics, that COVID-19 could increase this financing gap to up to a third, which is a huge amount of money. So closing the financing gap will be absolutely critical to determining how education systems recover from COVID-19 and to try and fix this crisis. We are in a crisis within an existing crisis, and I think it's important for us all to understand that. I think when we're talking about the learning crisis, often people think because of COVID-19, even before this hit, we were already in a crisis. So a big part of filling that financing gap will be funding the Global Partnership for Education. I know that all seems like a very big challenging situation, but we do have hope with the Global Partnership for Education and other opportunities this year that we will try and start to fill that gap.
Thanks, Anna. Great answer to the first question. We are now going to go over to Brighton for question number 2.
Yeah, hi. So question number 2 is, why is the Global Partnership for Education so important for helping children around the world to get the education that they need?
Great, thank you. And a question that the UK government is asking us daily. So yeah, it's great that we've got the arguments for this. So GP is absolutely in a place to deliver this. It's the largest global fund solely dedicated to education and also a unique multi-stakeholder partnership. And it leverages billions of dollars and convenes hundreds of partners to deliver education. There's 3 kind of core parts of GPE that I think make it unique in terms of delivering global education, are really critical in getting us towards SDG 4. The first is in terms of systems strengthening. So GPE works with national governments to improve their education systems. So rather than just kind of putting a plaster on issues when there are gaps in education, it works to strengthen systems with national governments rather than for them. So investing in GPE, oh no, sorry, that's the next one. So a part of countries saying that they'll work with, or GPE giving grants to national governments, is that they say that they have to work with them to look at the entire education system. So looking at what's stopping from girls and children getting into education, looking at teacher training, looking at the barriers to education, looking at learning outcomes. They'll look at the whole system and work with national governments to try and strengthen it, which is a sustainable way to develop education systems. The second is in terms of leveraging additional financing. So one thing that I would think is important to say is promoting domestic financing, which is incredibly important. And we know it's the best way to finance education is for national governments to fund it themselves. And that's a big focus for GPE, and they've got a really good track record in doing so. So to receive a GPE grant, partner countries have to meet several different requirements, and one of them is a commitment to increase domestic budget allocation for education to 20% of the total national budget. So it's not just GPE kind of giving countries financing. National governments also have to leverage that and bring it out of their budget too. The third is the focus on barriers to education. And I mentioned this before, but GP don't just focus on learning outcomes and reading and writing, etc. They also look at the barriers that stop children getting into school, whether it's social norms, discrimination, gender-based violence in the community, school-related gender-based violence, access to sexual and reproductive health services, tackling child marriage. So they look at this whole systems approach and look at these barriers, which is particularly why I'm working for Plan and focusing so much on gender equality. I'm really passionate about the fund. And the final thing I would say there is that they really focus on countries with the greatest need and the hardest to meet. And that is a challenge that we have in existing education funding, that it isn't often going to those places. So the Global Partnership focuses on low-income countries, and more than 60% of GPE's funding goes to countries affected by conflict and fragility, where we know the most children are out of school. So the impact of GPE investment and the funding, they estimate that they boost 164 billion to partner countries' economies. They are going to lift 18 million people out of poverty. They save 3 million lives, and they estimate that they prevent early marriage for 2 million girls, which is a really promising statistic.
That's tremendous impact. Thanks so much for that, Anna. We now have the third question is coming from Bethan, who I believe is in Cheshire. Bethan, over to you.
Yep, so the third question from our group is why does the Global Partnership for Education need funding now?
Thanks, Bethan. That's probably a short answer, but a key one. So GPE works on a replenishment cycle. So every 5 years, they'll fundraise for 5 years so they can deliver their programs and funding, and then they'll come back around on that cycle. This year is the start of their next cycle and the start of them delivering their next strategy. So in July, and Aaron mentioned this before, they are hosting their replenishment conference at the Education Summit, and that will be hosted by the UK government, well, co-hosted by the UK government and the government of Kenya. And they're hoping to leverage $5 billion, that's US dollars, to deliver their strategic plan. Now, it's key here, and I think it's probably of importance to all of you and why we need your support so much, is that it's quite a big deal that the UK government is co-hosting this. It sent a strong signal across the globe and also to the UK that the government is serious about delivering education and to playing a leadership role in this. So as we look towards the replenishment conference, we'll be asking the UK government to pledge 16% of that total 5 billion target, which is 600 million. So we've got quite a short timeline leading up to July, and which is why we are all busy on our advocacy strategies, and it's great to see all of you contributing to that too.
Thanks. We started in Manchester, where, and I think a bit further north, we're now going to go all the way down to the south, to Poole, for the last question before we open the floor.
Hello, it's Helen from Poole here. With the threat to the UK aid budget, a big reduction coming, how realistic is it to ask the UK to give more money to education?
Thanks, Helen. A very good question. And, you know, as Aaron set out at the start, and I did when I first started speaking, it is a very challenging context, and we can't get around that. You know, Aaron mentioned the aid budget cut from 0.7 to 0.5, or the potential cut, we're not there yet, is likely to reduce aid by 4.5 billion, and we should address that in all of this messaging. But you know, there is hope. I said this at the start, but girls' education is the UK government's top development priority at the moment. It's a personal development priority of Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, and he, you know, often references girls' education and education in speeches. It was committed to immediately after the spending review, when the potential aid cuts were announced by Dominic Raab as an area that they want to protect. So the political commitment is absolutely there. They've committed to hosting the Global Partnership for Education, which, as I said, sends a strong signal that they're serious about this. They're also hosting the G7, which some of you may be aware of and others not, but that's in July, also at the start of July. And girls' education and education more broadly is part of the leaders track of that, which is a technical term, but it means that it's a leaders priority. Now, despite this, at the moment, education's share of the aid budget at the moment is continuing to shrink, and it has declined year on year since 2016. It's currently standing at just about 5.6%, which is similar to the amount that the government spends on banking and finance. And just to put that in perspective, if you compare, the government spend currently 15% on health, so it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot lower. But the good thing is that there are lots of influencing opportunities, as I said. So, you know, if we're starting from that point, we have good messaging and good arguments to go into the government and say, if you really are politically committed to education, you really have said this publicly, you've committed to hosting GPE, you've committed to millions of girls around the world, then we have to do better. We want to increase aid to education from 5.6% up to similar to health. And we say that a great way for you to do that is to pledge the Global Partnership for Education. And I would just say, finally, also, I think those of us who come to this, and I can talk about the process if it's helpful, if anyone's got any questions of how we come to these figures, but I think those of us who spend our days advocating towards the UK government, if we didn't think it was possible and we didn't think the funding was there, if they prioritise correctly, we wouldn't ask for this amount of money. We wouldn't put ourselves out and kind of make promises to millions of children around the world that we couldn't keep. The money is there, they do have it, and with the right prioritising, with the right campaigning, and with the right policy asks with the government, then I do believe that we can get there. So yes, very challenging. Yes, we have a big road ahead to climb, a mountain ahead to climb. We've got to get to the right people, and we've got to make the right arguments, but I do believe that we can get there.
Thanks, Anna. We think so too. That's why we're doing this. One of the things that we promise all of you is that we will never waste your time. We will not ask you to campaign for something that we don't think is winnable. It might be tough, but we think it's winnable, which is why we're here and why we've got the ask that we've got. So that's it for the pre-canned questions. Now it's open season. We've laid the groundwork for what we're talking about tonight. We've seen a little bit about where the GP stands in terms of its ask, the role that it plays, and how the UK government can play its part. So opening up the floor, please introduce yourself before you ask Anna. What I'm going to do first of all is go to the question in the chat, because I think it carries on quite nicely from the answer that Anna just gave. I don't know if anyone from Results Norwich wants to unmute themselves and speak to their question that they put in the chat.
Yeah, that's Mark here. Yeah, it was just the fact that I noticed on the GP website that Boris is actually on there with a quote talking about the fact that urging the global community to come together to dig deep to ensure that every child has a chance in education, which sort of makes no sense with regards to the 0.7% cut. Is this a smoke screen? Yeah, I'm just a bit confused by the language.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it's a good observation. I mean, I think there's a couple of points that I would say here. The first is that there is a lot more rhetoric than action that we're seeing at the moment. We've all been very encouraged and by the Prime Minister's commitment to girls' education and his messaging around it. And he really does answer whenever you ask any questions about development. It's girls' education, it's education. But at the moment, we are starting to ask questions about where the action is. And this is exactly the kind of messaging that we need to pick up on as campaigners and say, okay, you've said that we need to step up. You now need to deliver this 600 million pledge. So there is not enough action, I would say, as opposed to the rhetoric. And we could say that it's a smokescreen. We're yet to see. They've got big opportunities this year to deliver, and I don't want to say that he's failed to deliver yet, because we've got, yeah, as I said, a big mountain to climb. The other thing, though, I would say that a big priority for the government at the moment is getting other countries to step up. The UK government has been a leader in global education historically. They are big players in the Global Partnership for Education. They gave 19%, I believe, at the last share, at the last pledging conference. They also play a big leading role in Education Cannot Wait, which is another fund. So, you know, they are players in global education, and a big priority for the next conference is for them to get other countries to step up. And whilst we as campaigners are holding them to account on getting their own finances over the line, we also do want to encourage the UK government to ask others to step up. So it is encouraging that Boris is asking other governments to kind of dig deep, but it's a good observation, and we don't want to call it a smokescreen yet, because we want to hold him to account and make sure that he does deliver in July.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if anybody would like to ask a question verbally. If you want to pop yourself off mute and yell out your name, and we can get you to ask a question to Anna.
Can I ask a question?
Please go ahead. Don't forget to introduce yourself and where you're from.
It's Kathy from Edinburgh. And I just wanted to ask Anna, in the light of the amalgamation of the Foreign Office and Foreign and Commonwealth and DFID, has that, because I know DFID was really, really strong on education, have they in DFID been affected by that amalgamation? And has that had an impact on the way they're able to deliver the messaging to the politicians?
Thanks, Kathy. I'm also in Edinburgh, so it's nice to know that you're just around the corner. Yeah, it's no secret that we all campaigned for the two departments not to merge. It was a disappointment to us. DFID was full of top civil servants who are absolutely expert with the sole driven objective of ending poverty. And, you know, merging with the Foreign Office was a disappointment for us. It's difficult to say. I think, you know, we haven't lost any of the DFID staff. They are now in the Foreign Commonwealth, the Development Office, and I work closely with the officials there in the education team, and they are as driven and dedicated to the job as they were, and they haven't lost that knowledge and expertise. There will be challenges in the fact that it is lost in a bigger department. A challenge that we've got, and Results, this is from Plan, but Results may have got this as well, that it's very difficult to get to the Foreign Secretary. He has a very, very big portfolio, and not having a Secretary of State specifically looking at international development can be a real challenge in terms of getting things over the line in Parliament. But it also has presented opportunities. I mean, we have access to many more countries across the world. It means that the Foreign Office are now also working to DFID's objectives. They're working a lot more closely. The education team is much bigger. And in the new education team at the Foreign Office, they've brought in gender equality and other issues. And crucially, education is still an absolute priority for the Foreign Secretary. So to hear the Foreign Secretary say girls' education and international development is great. So yes, there are challenges in not having a Secretary of State, but there are opportunities. And at the moment, yeah, as I say, we're working very closely with the officials, and we have positive relationships with them. So hopefully it'll be okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. I see that Ricky's put a question into the chat too. I think it's a broader question than just on education. So Ricky, if it's okay, I'll hold off on that one till a little later in the call, and we'll keep on the vein of education just for now. Jill, you've put a question in the chat. I think it's an interesting follow-up to the one that Anna just asked. Do you want to very quickly ask that, Jill? Is that okay?
On mute. There we go. Okay. How committed is the Fcdo to education of children with disabilities? We know that DFID was very committed to that, and they'll have brought that expertise with them. But is it on their radar? You've mentioned girls' education, but do you see the education of children with disabilities on being mentioned?
Thanks, Jill. It's a very important question, and one that we are still asking of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. As you say, disability was a big priority. I think there was a Global Disability Summit a couple of years now when Penny Mordaunt was Secretary of State for International Development. It is her big issue, and there were lots of commitments made. We've got colleagues who work more closely on disability who follow those priorities closer. It's something that we're continuously having to ask the Fcdo to kind of remind them of the priority of children with disabilities. The challenge that we're seeing at the moment is that girls' education is such a commitment for the Prime Minister and such a commitment for the Foreign Secretary that we're worried that we're losing these other issues, including children with disabilities. So we need to make sure that in all of our messaging and our campaigning that we're reminding them constantly that addressing the needs and getting children with disabilities into education is a priority. And I think COVID has given us that opportunity. Children with disabilities, as we know, are some of are out of school and not accessing remote learning, are telling us that we're not accessing it at all or in a limited way. So it remains to be seen, much like with other issues. There's lots of things within the Fcdo, I would say, which are kind of still being sorted out. If you imagine the logistical nightmare of merging two massive government departments, they're still working through priorities, whether strategies come across to the new department, etc. And that goes the same with, follow up from the Global Disability Summit and the commitments they made. So I think it's up to us as campaigners to continue to raise the issue with them. But in short, I think the answer is not enough, to be honest.
Would it help if we were to? My MP has got we've got a very large school, special school within her constituency. Would it help to get her on board?
Yeah, absolutely. As much pressure as we can get from parliamentarians at the government on children with disabilities, the better. And in fact, Send My Friend to School, we run a campaign each year where we work with schools and colleges to campaign towards the UK government on different issues. And GP is part of that, and including that will be advocating for better education for children with disabilities. So perhaps if you get in touch with someone from Results of where the school is and who the MP is, we can look to see whether we can get them involved.
Thank you.
We've got a great question come in from the chat from Kenny. Do you want to go ahead and ask that one? I think that's actually a really good question for now.
Yes, certainly. Right, I'm Kende from Birmingham. Right, it's just the recipient national governments. I don't know if I've understood this correctly, if they get supported for 5 years, because you talked about the 5-year cycle. So after 5 years, then, do they then look to increase their 20% requirements, that they ought to meet? Yeah.
Thanks, Kenny. Just so I've understood that correctly, do you mean after 5 years, do they increase from the 20% commitment of domestic financing?
Yeah, that's right. The recipients, national governments, that's right, yes.
No, so they haven't got a commitment to do that, and many stay with the 20% commitment after the 5-year replenishment cycle. So it's a commitment they'll make each replenishment cycle. So when a new grant from GPE goes to that country, they'll recommit to the 20%, but there's no ask of them, as far as I'm aware, to go above the 20%.
do any of them of their own volition go above 20% without even being a requirement? You think that that should be the aim eventually?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. I could look into it to find out. Some may have done. I know that it's not a requirement, but yeah, you would hope that they would. But yeah, we can find that out. I don't know, Aaron, if you know that.
I don't know that figure off the top of my head, but what I do know is that if you look at where global education spending on education comes from, the vast majority of the money that's spent are countries' own monies. And it's either government money being spent in terms of taxation money being spent, or it's out-of-pocket expenditure from parents, which is huge, huge in many countries in the world. And actual aid to education is a relatively small percentage of the global education spend, very, very quite minor. The key thing about our education aid is that it's phenomenally well targeted. And when it goes through an organization like GPE, it helps, with not for, it helps build better systems for everybody in the country, even though the bulk of the heavy lifting in most countries is actually done with, that country's own funds. So that's a really useful thing to keep in mind in terms of the P in GPE stands for partnership.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Aaron?
Please go ahead, Bill.
The £600 million that we're asking for, presumably that's not new money, that's coming out of the existing aid budget. So do we have a sufficient sort of overview of the whole situation to know that we're not actually depriving some other worthwhile project of £600 million to finance this worthwhile project?
Anna, I don't know if you want to answer part of that, and I can maybe answer another part. I don't know if you have anything to kick us off, because I've got some of an answer, but maybe you want to have a go.
Yeah, sure. Just check. We're going to say the same thing. So a challenge with the UK aid budget is that we don't have a good enough overview of where it all sits and where it goes. But we have come to the percentage as looking at the whole of the education budget and the aid budget overall, looking at the percentages that government has given before, looking at what we think is realistic and what they can give. I would say that within that 600 million couched is us arguing for more funding for education overall. So we're saying that the government doesn't give enough money for education, that percentage figure needs to increase to get to the 600 million. Aaron, I don't know if you were going to say something else.
Well, yeah, I think so. Absolutely agree completely. And also to sort of say that one of the things our sector as a whole has been pretty bad at doing, and we should acknowledge this, is that we've been less good at calling out less effective uses of our aid money. We're quite positive people. We like to be able to point to success. We like to be able to talk about stuff that has high impact, is good value for money, and has a great track record. And so we tend to talk about that stuff rather than going out of our way to talk about the stuff that has less impact, less evidence, and isn't as effective a use of our aid spend. The things that we advocate for in results, particularly things like education and particularly things like the GPE, tick all of the boxes: cost effective, high impact, powerful track record, in alignment with UK development objectives. There's plenty of stuff that the Secretary of State knows that they're spending, that they could stop spending, that doesn't tick all of those boxes. And frankly, it's not my job to do their job for them to figure out what that, or what all the details and nuance of what all the most rubbish spending they make is. That's not, we like to help them out a bit where we can in that regard, but that's not where we spend the vast majority of our energy. But trust me, there is some there that could be repurposed for this without hurting the stuff that we know is high quality and high impact. I've got a couple of people asking questions. Sammy's wanting to ask a question. I don't think we've had a question from them before, so I'm going to go to them right now. Just conscious we're really close up to time, and we have to circle back to Ricky's question to finish us off, because I promised that we would. So Sammy, if you could keep your question short, that'd be really helpful.
Hi, this is my first meeting, so I'm not entirely. I'm Sammy from Edinburgh too, and I was just wondering how the government ensures that their budget within education is going towards the right things, and also following on from the question about children with disabilities, and maybe if there is things the budget could go more towards that would cover all the bases rather than separating people with disabilities and without disabilities?
Thanks, Sammy. That's a great question. There's so many of us in Edinburgh, if only we could have got together. How do they ensure that funding's going to the right places? So they look at impact. They have different systems to hold them to account and to tell them where they should be spending the money. They have lots of an evidence hub that will look at their programs, how effective they are. And that's how they'll decide where they go. The Secretary of State will often decide on kind of key priorities that they want to focus on, looking at that, and they'll decide where that funding goes. So as I said, when Penny Mordaunt was the Secretary of State, disability was her big focus, and we've got girls' education as the big focus. I think the unfortunate thing of us working in this, it often goes from issue to issue, and as you say, we need to look at the whole picture for that continuity. So they've got lots of ways of kind of figuring it out. And a big way, to be honest, a big way that they decide how to spend their money is looking at us, looking at our campaigners, and us telling them what we know are the right ways for them to spend it, which means that we can have a lot of impact. And the Global Partnership for Education is absolutely one of them. And the question on singling out children with disabilities, absolutely, we should be looking at whole systems and all children. I think what is key is for us to make sure that we are focusing on children that are perhaps being left most behind, and children who have, for various factors, are the most marginalized because of different systems, discrimination, etc. Those are girls, particularly adolescent girls, children with disabilities, refugee and migrant children. And I think a key kind of way for us to tell the government that they need to target and focus their efforts on those children is to actually show that there are discrepancies in learning outcomes in education for all children, and then specifically for those children as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. Now we're going to finish off very quickly with Ricky's question from, well, actually, why don't you ask it, Ricky? Go ahead.
Hello, actually, it was my question, but it's
sorry.
Ricky's computer. I was just asking about the 50% cut to aid to Yemen, whether that's indicative on what's happening to aid and what it means for the Save UK Aid campaign.
And do you mind if I tackle that one? Is that okay? So just really briefly, I mean, I think that's a really important question, because I think if you do a bit of reading, and there's been some great links put in the chat on this as well, some of the outrage that's generated in Parliament, that decision to massively cut aid to Yemen, with all of the challenges that has with the situation there, the multidimensional nature of that conflict and the humanitarian crisis and what our aid was supporting, the outrage that's generated, I think, actually gives me a lot of hope that we have powerful energy in Parliament and in the public to fight the cuts, to keep the fiscal space open for us to continue our aid. So I think I'm obviously hugely disappointed and saddened by what they've announced, not to make any light of that at all. It's awful. But I think that the opposition to it is strong, and the opposition to it should give us hope that we can continue this work to fight those cuts more broadly, to get some of that aid reinstated and to get it focused back in on the things that have really, really huge impact. And I think so if there's anything that you take from this evening, I do hope that it is, looking across the channel to France, that there is hope here, and that the broad thrust of history will be on our side. We will win this fight, and it's really important that we do so. That, I think, is unfortunately all we have time for. I'm really sorry to say that, because the conversation is just so rich. So I just want to start my finish by saying a big thank you to Anna for sharing her expertise on global education with us this evening. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Also, really quick shout out to Hannah. Sounds like Anna, but different person. Hannah, who's joined the call tonight. Hannah Nixon. Shout out to the Send My Friend to School campaign, live campaign going on in the UK at the moment. If you are a teacher or know a school, their schools campaign is live. Do get involved. That's absolutely brilliant, and really glad to have Hannah join us. Her email details are in the chat. We'll make sure that you Send My Friend .org.uk is the place to go. last of all, if you can, please do take this month's action. It will make a difference. It's right to the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab MP, to express your support for an early pledge by the UK government to the GPE of at least £600 million over 5 years. The over 5 years bit is important. It's not a £600 million lump sum. It's over 5 years, which makes it really affordable year on year. We understand that the GP's investment case, that's the document that the decision makers look at in order to decide what they're going to do. That investment case is with ministers right now. But unfortunately, we don't have the insight on an exact date by which the decision will be made. So that means that this month we recommend you take your action sooner rather than later to make sure that your advocacy counts and that it lands right when it's going to apply maximum leverage to that decision making, so that ministers will see whether the UK public will applaud or be disappointed by the decision. So let's let them know where we stand and let them know where we want them to stand too. So our next Grassroots conference call, mark your diaries. It's going to be the first Tuesday of the month as normal, Tuesday the 6th of April at the same time, 8 p.m. Finally, I'd like to thank you once again for your continued commitment to taking action to address global poverty. It's a good night from me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye. Nice to see
Bye,
you.
everyone. Have a good week.
Bye.
Take care.
Night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Helen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.